Hey everyone, it's Kristi. Today we're talking about something that completely reshapes how we think about aging, and honestly, this might be one of the most important videos I've ever done. For decades, aging has been treated like a slow, predictable decline, a straight line, but new research, especially a groundbreaking cell metabolism study, has turned this idea upside down. We now know that biological age doesn't just go up, it goes up and down, and it's dynamic, it's responsive, and in many cases, it's reversible. And the biggest driver behind these shifts is stress. Today, we're diving into epigenetics, biological clocks, what stress actually does to your cells, why biological age can spike during something like surgery or pregnancy, stressful times, and then it can fall back down. And that leads us to what we can do to control this process. Plus, we're going to talk about a few interesting peptides like oxytocin, VLAN, epitalin, and GHK copper that may support recovery and resilience. This is a deep dive, so let's jump in. Let's start with epigenetics because this is the foundation of everything. Your DNA sequence doesn't change throughout your life, but the way your genes are regulated absolutely does. This regulation happens through epigenetic marks, such as methylation, histone modifications, and chromatin structure, which is the protein that surrounds our DNA. And this determines which genes stay on, which are switched off, and then how our cells behave as a result of that. The epigenome isn't static, it's listening to the environment around us every second of the day. So your sleep, your stress, your diet, infections and trauma and exercise and relationships and mood, everything responds. So your genes are responding to everything that's happening in your life. This is why two people with similar genetics can age completely differently, even twins, because what really determines the rate of aging is not the genes themselves, but how these genes are expressed over our lifetime. And this is where biological clocks come in. So things like Horvath, Grim age, Pheno age, Dunedin pace, these clocks are used to measure DNA methylation patterns and then use them to estimate your biological age. That's not your age in years, that's the function of your body. And that number predicts almost everything. So disease risk, mortality, resilience, and how well we respond to stress, even how long we might live. But the big picture turning point came when researchers realized that these clocks don't just steadily climb, they actually fluctuate. Let's talk about the study that changed the game. In 2023, researchers published an incredible paper in Cell Metabolism where they analyzed biological age during different forms of stress. So emergency surgery, pregnancy, COVID infection, severe immune activation, and then even young mice that were exposed to the blood of older mice, which we'll talk about. And here's what they found. So biological age spiked during the stress, no surprise there. But it quickly dramatically fell across all models. And again, this was in mice and in humans. It fell to baseline levels after the stress resolved. So first up, elderly patients that were undergoing an emergency hip surgery, and they actually compared this to people that were getting elective surgery. So the patients that were in the emergency surgery saw a sharp increase in biological age immediately after the procedure. And then pregnant women also showed increases in biological age that steadily climbed and peaked around delivery. COVID patients arrived biologically older than they were before the infection. And so even in mice that were connected to older mice through what's called parabiosis, this is where their blood system is connected, that instantly aged these younger mice. But, and this is the part that blew everyone's mind, once that stress resolved, the biological age fell back down. So that's what's really interesting and really important. So we have a lot more control over this than we ever knew, and that's what we're going to get into. So the surgical patients, they returned to baseline. These new mothers, after the pregnancy, after they gave birth, their biological age returned to youthful states postpartum. The COVID patients recovered their epigenetic age as the inflammation settled. And it didn't take years. It was actually just days or weeks. So aging isn't a straight line. It's more of a wave. And stress is one of those big factors that pushes that wave upward. Now, if biological age rises during stress and drops with recovery, then the real secret to longevity isn't avoiding stress, which is obviously impossible, but strengthening that recovery phase. The faster and more efficiently your body can recalibrate, the lower your long-term biological age stays elevated. This is why two people can go through the exact same stressful event, but age differently afterward. Resilience is everything. And we have something called neuroplasticity where our brain is not fixed. So these things can be modulated and improved. If it's something that you struggle with, you do certainly have the ability to improve that. So what improves recovery? Well, number one, exercise, especially strength training and moderate amounts of cardio. This actually remodels the epigenome in ways that enhance mitochondrial function, it improves immune readiness, and it improves our repair capacity. And then meditation and breath work. I love these things, these tools. They help quiet that HPA axis and they lower cortisol and they shift your biology back into repair mode. And this is ultimately something that you can do to recover from stressful periods or, take that time for yourself daily or weekly or whatever that means to you. And then sleep and circadian rhythm alignment. So this stabilizes our epigenome. Epigenome is tied 100% into longevity pathways. Even our telomeres respond to our sleep patterns. So once we normalize those rhythms and really anchor into that biology of recovery and really support our sleep, that is going to change the way that we age. So these are non-negotiables. We can't bypass them. We have to embrace them, if you will. But there's also growing interest in tools that may support recovery, especially when stress is high or chronic, and we don't always have control over this. One of the most interesting candidates here is oxytocin, which is a peptide, typically used as a nasal spray or troche. And by the way, so it is used to induce labor. So this is not something we would want to use in a situation of pregnancy, but that's a much higher dose, by the way, than what we're talking about. When a lot of the studies that use oxytocin use it as a nasal spray because that seems to be the most effective way to administer it. Oxytocin modulates the stress response directly at the level of the brain. So it quiets the HPA axis and it reduces cortisol release. And it also dampens the inflammatory surge that accelerates the biological aging process. Now, animal studies show that oxytocin can even influence epigenetic machinery, including enzymes involved in our DNA methylation, mitochondrial function. And in aged mice, short-term oxytocin restored markers of DNA maintenance and sort of reduced that inflammatory aging signal. Human data is still early as far as the longevity piece. We do have a lot of studies using oxytocin in humans. It is a very safe tool. But we are seeing some early improvements in heart rate variability, in emotional resilience, in glucose regulation, and even in wound healing. And all of these are tied to biological age. I think of oxytocin peptide not as a magic bullet. None of these peptides are magic, but it can help accelerate recovery. And it's a tool that helps your body return to baseline more efficiently when life throws you into temporary overload. I mean, it can actually even be used on a daily basis. I personally use it pretty much every night in the evening around dinner time or when I'm trying to wind down and relax after the workday. Since we're on the topic of recovery, there are a few other peptides worth mentioning because of their potential influence on genomic regulation itself. So Vilon or Vilon, this helps normalize immune gene expression, and this is a major pathway that gets disrupted during stress and is also tied to longevity. We also have epitalin. This supports our circadian rhythm. Remember, I just said that the circadian rhythm is tied to telomere length and definitely tied to our longevity pathways. So this one helps with genomic maintenance, helps to stabilize some of the same processes that drift during chronic stress. And Vilon and epitalin can be used once or twice a year to kind of reset those pathways as part of a longevity toolbox. Then we have GHK copper. This one activates gene networks that are involved in repair and antioxidant defense and mitochondrial function. It kind of behaves as more of a reset signal for tissues after stress. And it's also a peptide that you've probably heard me talk before. It's a natural peptide, but it starts to decline with age. So it could be another tool in that longevity toolbox. Now, these aren't replacements for lifestyle, they're amplifiers. They're tools that may help your biology return to equilibrium more effectively. And when you zoom out, we start to see a new picture of aging. Aging is not linear, it's very responsive, and biological age is going to rise when we're in survival stress mode, but it can fall back down when your body shifts into repair. That means the real superpower isn't avoiding stress. It's essentially how fast and how well you recover. And you do have tools for that. So it's going to be movement. It's going to be breath work, breathing, like meditation type breathing. It's going to be getting really good sleep, getting, having that circadian rhythm and really optimizing your sleep. It's going to involve connection, not just with humans, but that is super, super important. We've seen that in the longevity studies that the more that we have culture that supports human connection, the longer people live and they're healthier, but also connection with nature. So getting outside when you can and just grounding and appreciating nature. This is all going to help us return to that equilibrium when life is going to push us out of it. And it's our job to kind of find ways to rebalance it. This is the future of longevity. So it's not freezing time, but it's learning how to move through it with resilience, with rhythm, with restoration. And aging isn't fixed, it's flexible. So that means that your health span is far more in your hands than you ever realized. And thanks for watching. If this helped you rethink aging, give it a like, share it with someone who would appreciate this, and subscribe for more science-forward content on peptides, longevity, and women's health. And if you want to work with me one-on-one or join my private peptide and longevity community, all the links are below. I would love to support you on your optimization journey. And see you in the next video.